Hi, everyone. I'm Linda Crawford. I'm really excited to be sharing with you today, and I thought you might like to see my face before looking at the PowerPoint slides, and I look forward to seeing you in person at the San Diego Pain Summit for our live question and answer session. And as you can see, my hair color has changed a little bit in the last year, as it has for many people, but I hear that it's now in style. So first of all, I just want to say how honored I am to be presenting at the San Diego Pain Summit. I've been a participant for a number of years, and I believe I'm only the second occupational therapist behind the amazing Bronnie Lennox Thompson to be presenting at this conference. I've been an occupational therapist for over 30 years, and I currently own a private practice here in Denver, working with people with complex pain conditions. I've also become a certified Daring Way facilitator. That's Brene Brown's work. I'm one of a handful of occupational therapists who are certified in her work, and I integrate that into my practice as well. So today the title is Do, Feel, Think, Humanizing the Pain Experience from an Occupational Therapy Perspective. So what I want to share today is this idea that everything that we do is an occupation. So even laying on the couch is considered an activity, and that's an occupation. And as human beings, we're always engaged in doing. And I think we can all agree that self-management and self-efficacy skills are critically important for a person in pain to develop. But here's what I want to propose in this presentation, that it's important that we humanize the pain experience by digging deeper into not just what we do, but looking at how we experience the things we do and understanding those experiences in a deeper way and how it can change our lives for the better when we do understand. So first of all, let's just talk about everybody is doing every single day. And you regulate yourself by your doing. You do things that you want to do, and you do things that you need to do or you have to do. And if we explore the factors that influence how we experience our activities, it can help us to understand how to help other people, how their lived experiences can change their pain experiences. So here's a quote, and this is not my quote, but I would say it could be my quote. When I do, I become someone. And here's a picture of me in April 2014, after over 4 years of persistent chronic pain, when I could barely leave my house or walk a block. And this was after my very first hike with a friend of mine, and we went about 2.5 miles. And I sat on the rock and cried because I never believed that I could do it, or that my pain could diminish enough that I could get back to living and doing the things in life that really brought meaning and joy to me. So this was part of my identity. I became more myself when I was able to do this activities that helped me recover from my persistent pain experience. And it's really the shift from just existing to actually living. And if you are interested in reading more about my story, I have a blog. The link is there on the screen. I've just started so far with one entry of it, but I will be sharing more of my chronic pain story and how I recovered despite being told that I wouldn't. I never would. So when I do, I become someone. I want to keep that thought in your mind as we go forward. And I always want to start with highlighting the voices of people who are experiencing pain every day. As a person who formerly experienced pain, I know how important it is for us to learn from those people who have learned how to live well despite their pain and sometimes overcoming their pain. And Joletta's an amazing friend, and I know she's been a person who's been very involved in the San Diego Pain Summit and is a co-chair of the IASP Global Alliance of Pain Patient Advocates Task Force. And here's what she says: pain is experienced by a human, and we live in a human complex world. But that doesn't mean you have to know how to fix their pain. That's for us. What it means to us as those trying to help people in pain is that we can help them get back to living their lives, and knowing that we can change our experience and our lives can get better, even if the pain doesn't change. Wow, that's just such profound for us, words for us to grab hold of. We can help people get back to living lives because they can change their experience and their lives can get better. That's what they're to teach us. So Joletta said, we don't have to fix people, but we can help them get back to living their lives. But how well are we doing that? Here's a quote from George Engel from 1977. He said, "Nothing will change unless and until those who control resources have the wisdom to venture off the beaten path of exclusive reliance on biomedicine as the only approach to health care." So he challenged us to start trying new ways and to think about different ways of helping people in pain. But have we come far enough? That's my question. But here's the truth, like Joletta said, changing lived experience matters. It's important. It's not just relying on the biomedical treatment methods, drugs, physical treatments, passive treatments. It's about looking at the lived experience. And Engel challenged us in 1977, but we were also challenged back in 1912 by this man that you see in the picture, William Dunton. And William Dunton, because of his challenge to us in 1912, an entirely new profession was born, and that profession is occupational therapy. And William Dunton said, "There is no other remedy known at the present time that is more productive of good results than occupation." And William Dunton was a psychiatrist during a time where the biomedical model was developing rapidly, and it was the gold standard. And professionals were shamed if they didn't adhere to the accepted protocols of treatment. But those treatments for his patients, drugs and psychotherapy primarily, didn't work in the mental hospital that he worked at. But what he did notice worked was that people got better when they had something meaningful to do. So he created a woodshop and he bucked the system, and the profession of occupational therapy began. And occupational therapy is a profession that has been dedicated to the study of human doing. It's the cornerstone of our practice, our philosophy, our belief system, is that humans change their health through their doing. So let's look at our learning objectives for this session. We have 5. We're going to explore perspectives of thinking, feeling, and doing, and how they shape our go-to approaches in helping and supporting people in pain. We're going to identify 4 elements of the human experience of doing and their impact on the lived experience of people in pain. We're going to talk a little bit about common physical, environmental, and psychosocial factors that influence the lived experience of daily activities. You're going to complete a personal reflection on experiences of daily activities in a simple method to begin to help people in pain to explore their experiences. And lastly, I hope that you recognize the value of helping and supporting people in pain to change their lived experiences from an occupational therapy perspective. So before we dig into the learning objectives, let's just review a little bit what the lived experience is like for most people experiencing pain. Here's what happens in daily life. Impaired lifestyles. People are less able to exercise, sleep, do their activities of daily living, engage in social activities, drive, walk, have sexual relations. And relationships are often strained or broken. And we see this, and we recognize the life impacts that people are living. It's not just the physical limitations. It affects their entire life, their entire lived experience. And here's also some of the other impacts: independence, decreased self-worth, despair, loss of meaning of life, decreased positive expectations for the future, losses, personal, financial, vocational, threat to integrity, threat to who we are. And I would say also a lot of emotional impacts, particularly including shame, depression, anxiety, and grief. And if we were to put this in a picture, isn't this a great illustration of what it feels like? And from personal experience, I can tell you this is what it feels like: isolation, curled up. Life becomes about pain, and the rest of life becomes small. So pain begins to just consume our entire life, and the experience of pain and all those factors that we just talked about of the impacts, they become so big. And who we are in real life becomes really small. And this is a story that gets lived out every day. And I say all biography is biology because it's a lived story, and everything that we're living in day to day affects our physiology. It's going to affect how our physical body responds. Even going into that fetal protective position, right? Because of the pain, because of the emotional stress, because of the fears, all these things. Plus, of course, our drug cabinet in our brain is affected. And so everything, we can't separate our physical body from the story and the actual lived experience that is being experienced by a person living with daily pain. But isn't this what we all want? We want more life and less pain. And the people that we work with who are experiencing pain every day, they want the exact same thing. They don't want to be living that way. They want more life and less pain. So we want to help them achieve that. And there's lots of methods. And we know there's lots of different methods that have been shared at this conference and other pain conferences. But one of the ways that's incredibly powerful is for us to empower people to change their own lived experience. And here's a quote from Adolf Meyer, who is a very influential psychiatrist way back in 1922. He said, "A mentally healthy individual is an organism that maintains and balances itself in the world of reality and actuality by being active in life and active use. For example, using and living and acting its time in harmony with its own nature and the nature about it." And I love that description. Humans are healthy when we have that balance between being active and in harmony with ourselves, physiologically, our own nature, who we are, our identity, and the nature about us, the world, the people, the environments, the context, and the nature about us. So let's talk about another model of pain other than the biomedical, and that's the cognitive model of pain, because this also can have some of the constraints of the biomedical model. We've seen that. We talk about the biological and the psychological, and they can be separate, but we know individuals are biological, psychological, and social and spiritual human beings. But so if we take the cognitive model of pain separately, the cognitive model says if you change your thinking, that will change your feeling, and that will change your ability to do. So this is the traditional cognitive model. And if we treat a person just this way, change your thinking, that will change your feeling, that will change your doing and your experience of life. Again, we're missing some of the individual human experience of this if this is done in isolation. Now, we don't throw both of these models out completely, obviously, because there's merits to them. There's just limitations when they're done in isolation and not integrated into a greater holistic perspective and methods that really can help a person impact their lived experience of pain. So here I just want to propose an occupational model of pain, a broader integrated perspective, which is also the philosophical foundation of the profession of occupational therapy. Now, this is not a real model, but it's a summation of the philosophy of the occupational therapy framework of practice. That we're doing beings who feel and think. And it's by engaging in that doing, human occupations that we are doing 24/7 every day, that we have the greatest impact on our health. And if we can understand our experiences of doing and explore our feelings and then go to thinking, then we can come to some ahas about our own experiences. So I just want to say, here's the basic statement. Humans are doing and feeling beings that think versus humans are thinking beings who feel and do. This is the primary perspective of occupational therapy and occupational therapists. And so I want to propose to you, what if we started here when we are working with a person in pain? What if we switched our perspective from looking at the thinking or the biomedical parts of doing or the feelings by themselves, and we look at the doing first, and we begin to explore the lived experience of the person living in pain. So this is the opposite of just starting to treat symptoms or physical function or thoughts. And we've heard from people in pain that they don't need us to fix them. They need us to support them in getting back to living their lives and to becoming themselves again. So let's look a little more at how we might approach this. So this is a little more on the background of occupational therapy. Occupational science is defined as a way of thinking that enables an understanding of occupation, the occupational nature of humans, the relationship between occupation, health, and well-being, and the influences that shape occupation. And remember, occupation is just doing. It's anything and everything that we are engaged in doing in any moment of any part of our day. And the focus is on the whole, and that's considered stronger than a focus on isolated aspects of human functioning, which also means it's very complex. So back to all biography is biology. And Adolf Meyer, who said in 1922, our body is not merely so many pounds of flesh and blood with an abstract mind or soul just added to it. It's a live organism pulsating with rhythms of rest and activity. Rhythms of rest and activity. If you think about that, isn't that how we live our daily lives? We have rhythms of rest and activity throughout each and every day. And this is the current occupational therapy practice framework. Just again, to illustrate to you, at the very center of our practice framework is helping people participate in occupations through life engagement to affect their health and well-being. And then all these factors that go into that, that we look at and we try to support people in achieving. And there's studies from occupational therapy that show that engagement in occupation has the ability to alter the perception of pain. And it's interesting that some people think they have to wait until the pain gets better before they can do things. And actually, the research shows it's the opposite, that engaging in meaningful occupations has the ability to change that pain experience. And it should be an integral part of the treatment and the practice that people are engaging in order to help themselves improve that lived experience of pain. So the interesting thing for me is that we have this research that supports this, but it's often been overlooked because it's primarily been qualitative research, because occupational therapists are studying the science of human occupation, the lived experience. And so it hasn't traditionally always been as accepted as the more highly funded biomedical placebo-controlled double-blind studies. But we do have over 100 years in our profession of studying the science of human occupation. So what about this lived experience and the activities that people engage in that change their pain in a positive way? How is that true? How does that happen? Well, I did a little experiment. This is not a research, but I put it out there to some groups of people who experience daily pain and just said, what are some activities that change your pain experience in a positive way? And here is a virtual bulletin board of some of the answers that people added to this bulletin board of things that help them feel better. They change their pain experience in a positive way. And if you read through, you can see all kinds of different things that maybe even you use to self-regulate that make you feel better if you're stressed out or anxious or have difficult things going on in your life. Gardening, practicing gratitude, stretching, woodworking, art. I think there's swimming in there, dancing, pets, lots of things. And then over on the left, you'll see disco duck. Now that one really stuck out to me when I heard that somebody felt like listening to disco duck helped their pain and helped them sleep better. And I just got to thinking, who is ever going to do a double-blind placebo-controlled study on disco duck helping a person in pain? Because it's not going to happen, right? Because pain is such an individualized experience that we can't really pick these individual things and say, oh, this is going to work for everybody, because some things work for some people and not for other people. But this person identified that that worked for them. And that's their evidence, and they discovered it. And I think that's the power of helping people explore their lived experiences and how they can discover activities that change their pain in a positive way. So we have to dig deeper, though. Research supports that engagement in meaningful activities can improve pain, health, and well-being. But it's not just about what we do. We need to go beyond the ideas of pacing, using the spoon approach, and even some of the traditional self-management techniques that we use. There's some data that we could find. There's like a gold mine of data we could find if we knew how to actually explore the science of the individual human doing of the person that we're working with. And so I have some ideas I want to share with you about how we do that in occupational therapy that you could consider integrating into your practice with people in pain. So one of them is this really simple survey that's widely available called the Engagement in Meaningful Activities Survey. And we talk a lot about engagement in meaningful activities. All our disciplines do. We know people want to re-engage with meaningful activities. But do we dig into what that means? I remember when I was in pain and my physical therapist asked me that, and I said, walking. Okay, great. So I wanted to be able to walk a mile. That was a goal. But interesting to me is when I eventually reached that goal, the way I was experiencing that wasn't really as meaningful as it had been before. It wasn't enjoyable. it was work. I was still fearful. I was still stressed. I was not just out there enjoying being outside in the sunshine and the leaves and the trees and the birds and all that. And I did learn to switch that experience for myself. But nobody asked me to look into how I was actually experiencing the meaningful activity. And sometimes when you're in pain, you don't even know what's meaningful anymore. So these kind of surveys can help us dig a little more into what are the activities? Am I doing things that take care of myself, that reflect who I am? How would I rate that? Am I being creative? Do I have a sense of accomplishment? Do I do value things to help other people or give me pleasure or sense of control? Are they expressing my values? Do we dig into our daily activities to see if they're meaningful in these ways and if it's in the right balance for us of what we want as individuals, what's true for us? Remember, when I do, I become more me. That's the opportunity we have. And so digging into this meaning can help us explore a little more if we're becoming who we really are, if we're balancing that. And then I want to share with you another tool. This is an occupational therapy tool, and it's only available fully to occupational therapists. So if there's OTs listening now, you can get the full version of this and get training to use this tool. And I tell you, this profoundly changed my practice 5 years ago when I met Karen and became a clinical advisor for the development of this tool, because it gave me this rich data on the lived experience of that people in pain were experiencing that I had trouble getting from interviews and even doing things with them and going into the real world. I'm still not getting all the data that was going to help me support them in learning how to change their lived experience. So I do have permission from Karen to share a general overview of this occupational experience profile with you today. So here's a basic overview of the profile. It helps you to uncover your experiences associated with everyday activities, to gain insights, examine factors of your lived experience, and clarify and establish your needs and wants. And then with the reflection, it helps a person plan to create and how to become more who they want to be and who we really are. So it looks as occupational therapy experiences are innate needs. We know that. We must understand the personal experience. Occupational experience is determined in part by perceived meaning. So that's explored in this tool. And occupational experiences are dynamic and they're interrelated. We know that. And they also vary within the same or across different occupations or contexts or time. This is the nature of occupational experiences. So I've simplified kind of the basic overview of some of the elements of this assessment for you. And step one is the 3 W's, what I call the 3 W's. This is a reflection process, but it also can be used as a planning process once you gain understanding of your experiences. So to start with, first of all, you want to assess, what are you doing? What do you identify this activity as that you are engaged in? And then where are you? What's the context? What's the environment? And then who are you with? This is step one, the 3 W's. You're with, or who, are you alone? The second step is to assess the doing experience. And this is where we really dig into the actual lived experience of an activity. And this is done on a scale 0 to 10. This is not the actual scale of the assessment itself, but it just makes it easier. And you're going to rate 4 different elements. And they are pleasure, productivity, restoration, and social connection. This is rating the experience of that activity you just identified and how you're experiencing on a scale of 0 to 10. Now, to understand the scale, 10 obviously is a very positive score, and 5 is kind of neutral. Less than 5 would mean you're experiencing displeasure, or you feel unproductive, or you have a loss of energy from that activity, or a negative social experience. And you can rate that from the 1 to 4 on the low end. 5 is neutral. Above 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is, yes, I have pleasure. Yes, I feel positively in the production. And yes, I gained energy from that activity. And I had a positive social connection. Now, it's important to understand that it's normal to have a mix of activities, some that have high numbers and some that have low. So there's going to be some activities that take our energy and others that give us energy. Some are more pleasurable than others. It's normal to have a mix, but it's really about the personal experience and the balance of activities in the person's individual life. And does it meet those values and meaning and balance that a person feels is best for them? So there's patterns that can begin to be recognized. And then we can talk about how this biography, these stories, are having an effect on the biology, on the physical, emotional experience of daily life. So why is this data important for self-managing pain? So I want to give you a few client examples to help illustrate the use of this tool and some of the data that I learned, but more importantly, the person with pain learned that helped them change their lived experience that then changed their pain experience. So one of them was to recognize that rest is not always restorative. I had a client who filled this out and she had rest in there where she laid on the couch. And we can think, oh, that's great. When you're pacing, whatever, self-management, you need to take a rest. But when we looked at her scores for laying on the couch, she had very low scores for pleasure. She didn't get energy from it. It was neutral or less. I think she lost energy even though she was resting. And she had low, like zero felt productivity. And so I just asked her, so what's going on when you rest? What are you doing? So it prompted me to ask a deeper question, right? And she said, well, every time I lay on the couch, all I can do is look around and think about what a failure I am. And I should be cleaning the house. And there's dishes in the sink. And my family must be upset at me. I'm a burden to them. And all these thoughts would overtake her. And then that would trigger shame, a huge shame response, which we know causes a domino effect in her physiology, right? Shame is going to cause all kinds of chemical responses, fight or flight, freeze, all those. And so that's so her rests were not restorative. So we got to talk about, well, how could you rest differently then? What do you think you could do? And she came up with, well, I guess I could listen to music. I said, that's a great idea. I could read a book. Great idea. That's what she did. And then rest shifted to becoming restorative. So a couple other examples for you. Playing the piano. I discovered that I'm not a great pianist or anything, but playing the piano for 30 minutes, I feel like I've had a 2-hour nap. So sometimes when I feel really just exhausted, if I go play the piano, I get up, it gives me energy. There are certain activities in life that actually give us energy back. And one of my clients, I just shared that story and she goes, I love to play the piano. She went home, did the same thing, worked for her. Fantastic. Had another client, when they looked at their profile and all their scores, everything was about productivity, no pleasure, no restoration, very little social connection. It was all about just doing. That was her reflection when she could see how she was living and experiencing her daily life. And so she made some changes to intentionally rebalance, have some more pleasurable and restorative activities that helped her lived pain experience. I had a client who looked at her social connection scores and realized her pain was always going up when she was alone, and she was alone a lot because she lived alone. And that was when her pain experience was the worst and hardest. So she got a roommate, and it profoundly helped her. We never would have looked into those things or thought about those or been able to have conversations or reflect on those without digging into the lived experience of these activities. I've also had clients who've thought, well, I got to wait until my pain goes away before I go to work. But then when we dug into what work felt like for them, they actually got energy back. They felt productive, which was a powerful, powerful physiological endogenous opioid release for their system. Really, their pain went down when they were working. So this person didn't wait. They went back to work very part-time, and gradually, through graded exposure, were able to work back into it and change their pain experience. So these things matter. Context matters too. Environments, we can dig into that, what happens when you're in these certain environments. Sensory processing, or being too loud or too bright or too much stimulation, too little social connection, some social connections that aren't great, that trigger your pain response. What can you do? What about how they experience their exercises that you're giving them? This can be really helpful to have some insight into it. How can you help a person change their experience of the home programs and the exercises and things that they may need to do? So there's so much data. Gives us a much broader picture of the story of the lived experience of a person, and all these different factors that we can then start having conversations about. What are the effects of the environment or context? The emotional and social factors. Are you living true to your values? What's the meaning? And remember that previous survey we talked about. What happens to your pain experience when you're doing these different activities? Is your rest restorative? Is the balance healthy? Is there too much isolation? And how do certain people or conversations influence your pain? And how do emotions, beliefs, and fear influence your daily experiences? And we can connect all this to the practices of mindfulness, of interoception, right? What do you feel in your physical body too? And how can that help inform you so that you can begin to make changes for yourself that help change your experience? And I want to just propose this to you, the 2-degree difference. There's no quick fixes. When we have persistent pain, that's so hard for the person in pain to accept, because we want to be out of pain. And it's difficult for us as the people who are trying to help a person in pain to accept that it's going to be a long, slow process. And I use the 2-degree of difference analogy to help explain it, that, 2 degrees, a little bit of change sustained over a period of time eventually becomes a big change. Looking deep into the lived experience that people in pain have and helping support them in changing that experience is a long, slow process. I feel like my first specialty in neuro rehab, working with people with acquired brain injuries and strokes, really helped me for this specialty now, because working with neuroplasticity, I knew that it was a very slow process that required patience and persistence and lots of repetition and embracing all the small little victories along the way. So the question is, do we have the patience to embrace this slow 2 degrees of difference process and time frame? It kind of requires us to put our hands behind our backs and stop trying to fix people or speed up the process, and instead allow the person in pain to be the expert on their own lived experience, to help them dig into this rich data that we can then explore with them and talk to them about so they can reflect and discover what can really help them, how they can help themselves. Isn't that our ultimate goal, right? To help people in pain discover that they do have the power, they are the experts, and they can change their pain experience. And I explain to people to 2 degrees is better, actually, because when we try to go for quick fixes, it's kind of like putting your hands on the steering wheel and turning it really fast. And when we do that, we crash. And that's typically what happens. But when we embrace this long, slow process, just make a 2-degree difference. And yay, that's fantastic. That small change makes a big change over time. So I'm going to give you a challenge before we meet for our live discussion during the Pain Summit. I want you to explore your human doing, because when we explore ourselves, then we can better understand the humans that we're working with every day that are experiencing pain. And I've used this framework that I explained to you in my own life for the last 5 years, and I revisit it frequently to make sure I'm living my healthiest, most balanced life that's authentic to me at any given time. And when COVID happened last year, I immediately pulled it out and I got a big whiteboard out and I wrote down 4 categories: pleasure, productivity, restoration, and social connection. And I wrote activities under each one that I could incorporate into daily life to help me maintain my mental and physical health. I wanted to make sure my biography was positively influencing my biology, and it really helps. And I've revisited it a number of times since too. So I want to challenge you to explore your own doing. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a look at 1 or 2 days and take some time to analyze your experiences of the activities you are doing. Then reflect. So look at the 3 W's and then rate the 4 measures of pleasure, productivity, restoration, and social connection. And then reflect on how well are you living authentically to your values, your meaning, your goals, and the balance for your life. And think about, how did you experience these activities in your physical body? What mindfulness practices maybe you did or didn't use? How does sensory and contextual and environmental and social pieces affect your levels of stress or your emotions? And how does that manifest in your physical body? What do you feel? And then what do you want to change? Think about it for yourself. What can you or do you want to change about your lived experience? And here's a virtual bulletin board that I've made just for you guys at the San Diego Pain Summit. And there's a QR code that will take you right to this board. It's live, and there's also the link there that you can copy. And I'd like you to go there and add some of your own activities you do that are pleasurable or restorative. I picked these because it's typical that most of us are not balanced. We do a lot of productive stuff, but we do less pleasure and restorative activities, and most of us need more of those. So I'd love for you to share what you discover about what helps work for you. And we will revisit this when we go live for our question and answer. We'll take a look at it, and you'll be able to see other people's answers. And you can be creative on here. You can have photos, you can have videos, you can do colors. So when you go to add in here, look at all the creative ways you can add something to this bulletin board. So just to kind of recap what we've talked about today, remembering that we are doing and feeling beings who think, and we learn through lived experiences, and we can dig into the data of our lived experiences to discover how to live more authentic, healthy, and happy lives. And this is true for all humans, and is particularly relevant for people living in pain. And we talk a lot about trying to help people generalize the skills that we're teaching in the clinic to their real lives. Well, here's the main link that we're missing. is really digging into lived experience and helping people make those real connections to how they're living and experiencing their daily activities. Some quick review of the main points from today. All biographies, biology. When I do, I become someone, myself, really. There is no other remedy known at the present time that is more productive of good results than occupation. And I will say that was true in 1912, and it's still true today. It's very, very powerful. We are human beings who do, and our health and our well-being is intrinsically connected to our engagement in meaningful activities. So changing the lived experience matters. So last words, always the person living with pain, the lived experience. They guide us in understanding the importance of addressing the lived experience. And we can help people with pain live better if we do more of what they are asking us to do. Humanize their pain experience through understanding the science of human doing. And Keith Meldrum, another amazing advocate for people in pain, powerfully says, when we start to consider what we can do and less about what we can't do, we develop self-efficacy and we can start to live better despite the pain. Refocusing away from what we can't do is one of the most important changes I needed to make. When we refocus our energy away from fighting into those things we can do, to those things that offer us contentment and joy, we begin to live better. Thank you, Keith, and thank you, Joletta. Their words are also my words. This is what I learned and I lived when I began to embrace the my lived experience and refocus away from what I couldn't do to what I could do. And I believe that is why I am now 7 years pain-free, which I didn't expect. It was that shift. And it's powerful to help people make that shift. And we all can do it. We can switch to the contentment and joy and living better. I hope you have fun doing your homework, and I look forward to seeing you live for the Q&A at the summit.